That is Don with Uniquely-DOUBLEBEE. Today I'll be changing out the CRE3000 suspension components on my 2021 Jayco North Point, and it's a 382 FLRB front living rear bath. She's 44 feet 5 inches, and I've been running on these things 3 years, and I'm pretty sure they're not safe anymore, and we have started losing tires. So I'm gonna get onto that because I just got the parts in, and let's get this thing started. First thing to do is clear the slides of things, put your stairs up, and get this thing. We use the landing legs to get it leveled up, just to where the tires are just barely touching, and then I'm gonna use my cylinder jack and a regular floor jack to raise the axles so I can get the wheels off, and then go from there. Tell me when.
Okay.
Have to show the air pressure too. 118, so it was the back tire, so that still within limits of driving all day. So something's could be the torque was off.
Too much science behind all that.
Yeah. All right, first things first, let's get these wheels in the air and removed. All right, got the tires off. My finger in the camera. Hi, sweet. But all right, so looks like this bracket is smacked into the leaf springs. The zert fitting disappeared, so pretty much probably no grease in there. And yep, I don't see any grease left in there. And then so I got to break that free. Missing the back strap on the leaf spring. Let's see. That's pretty solid. But here's the big problem this last road trip. Broke the MORryde CRE3000. Smashed all up in here. I'm sure this is ovaled out. And see, the zert fittings are all behind the wheels, so I can only get to these to grease them when I take my wheels off. But the new ones, I'm going to put them on the other side. Yeah, it looks like this thing is bent. Looks like that is bent. Oh, good fun. And then this one, the zert fitting's still there, but it looks like grease is limited in there. And we don't have any hard hit showing on that big spring. So I got my jacks positioned to hold this. Got the camper legs holding up most of the weight. So now we'll just start breaking this thing free. And we'll start up here and work our way to these. We'll crack them, crack it, and then we'll break this one free. Hopefully drop that out, get all the new stuff on there. All right, here we go. Now to remove the bushings using an old bolt to push them out of the slots. Now that I got the bushings out, and loosen up the equalizer and get that out of the way. All right, I got this CRE-3000 existing off of the camper, and yeah, do not go 3 years before changing this stuff for your own safety. Learning a big lesson right now. So this last road trip from Texas to Tennessee, you can tell the channel was digging into this thing and ripped the metal right through there. All the grease came out, and then on the other side ripped that side, and I'm almost certain that I bent this thing, so the center plate or the bracket. But then you come over here, I got to clean these out, but the back of, let's see, it's still a circle. And back there, I'll have to double check it, but these things were banging around pretty hard. The leaf spring here shifted a hair and then cut into this bracket, and then the bushings were gone. Now they were brass, which is basically what the MORryde one that the heavy duty I just bought, but that's gone. This, you can see where it was digging into the bracket was digging into this MORryde clip, and then the bushing's gone. Let's see, this front one, same thing, basically digging every ounce of that metal out. And again, the bushing's gone. That's the front one, that's the rear, front, and rear. So again, yep, it looks like leaf spring took a nick here. Not too bad, but this is a 7-stack leaf spring. It's pretty substantial, and we'll be getting the new stuff out. So let me do that, and then we'll show you the difference. So I measured everything, so I'm hoping this is correct, but I believe when I measured, I center to center on the wheels, and it was 35. So we'll get this CRE 2-35 out. It's a better weight ratio than what I had. This one was 7,000, and it's by MORryde. All right, let's open this thing up. All right, well, here's the new one. That's what this one used to look like. You can see where I ripped that welds here, which is right there. Those things got shredded. And got the other one. Here's the book. We'll have to look up the torque ratings. So yeah, that's the tools I use, plus crowbar and a hammer. But you don't hammer these bushings back in, that's for sure. You use a C-clamp. But I believe I looked on their MORryde's website. It said between 45 and 55 foot-pounds. All right, let me get this MORryde heavy duty. The wet bolts and all that, the new ones are in here. Hold on. All right, we got a nice little kit here. I got these from MORryde. These are the CRES-01. They're the heavy duty ones that are supposed to go with this CRE3000. All right, let me get set up and we'll get these things going. Get my grease gun and a few other things. Alright, when you install these new ones, you see this little pinhole. You need to make sure it's pointed sideways, like front to back, instead of up and down, because when the camper's down on it, it'll plug that hole and you'll never get grease in here. Just give it a little bit of pre-grease is what I'm getting ready to do. And then there's already a brass sleeve inside that knuckle there, and we'll get this finger tied on there. And then I'm gonna put the zert fitting on the inside so I can get up under my camper without the wheels. Actually, this one I can get to with the wheels on, so I'm gonna face it forward. But the ones on the leaf springs, I'm gonna face inward. All right, now that we have everything detached, we're gonna install the new CRE3000 or CRE3000 equalizer. But first you want to grease the wet bolt that inserts into the top fastener location. So you'll lightly apply grease with your finger and make sure it's not too much, because it'll push off and dry the bolt back out. Once you've got that ready, just install it, put the nut on the back end of it, and you're back in business for that part. Now we'll move on to installing the brackets. All right, we'll put these bushings, brand new ones, in the leaf spring holes, and the little brackets, but you don't grease these because you want them to be friction tight in there, and you use a C-clamp to push them in instead of a hammer in the ends and damaging them. You're going to want to make sure the bushing is a good fit with your hand. Get it started before setting up your C-clamp. I recommend using a C-clamp, but on the screw end, you want to use an old plate to push onto instead of onto the head of the bushing. That way you get this thing good and taut inside the opening of the leaf spring, and then grease up the bracket and install it the same way. Just be careful not to damage any of the bushing or the ends. Once you got the bracket on there, apply the second plate and hand tighten the nuts onto the wet bolts. After doing this, you're going to want to continue on to each of the 3 remaining leaf spring holes in the same fashion. Press the bushing on, make sure not to damage the end. Push on the bracket with the wet bolts, and then put the second plate, hand tighten with the nuts. When you're at the back bushing location, once you got that installed with the C-clamp, you'll want to get your jack and raise the leaf spring up to the U channel welded to the frame, and then align the leaf spring prior to inserting the bolt to ensure a straight fit. Adjustment can be up, down, as you need it, but it's going to be slight adjustments to get it aligned properly. And I recommend making sure the zert fitting is facing to the underbelly of the camper in order to get to it easily without removing the wheel and tire. Once you get that aligned, just make sure it's secure and taut inside the opening. Then once you work the other end, I found using a crowbar, flat crowbar that I got from Harbor Freight, I'll put the link in the description, was an easy way to adjust the leaf spring for insertion of the wet bolt, ensuring the zert fitting was facing the underbelly of the RV. Now, recommend a light tap to get it just aligned, but make sure you don't damage the zert fitting. If you can use an old lug nut or something, it will cup the zert fitting, and then you can hammer it without damaging the zert fitting. You'll see that later in this video. Once you have the 2 ends of the leaf springs fastened at the outer bolts, you'll want to get your jacks to adjust the wheel hubs and axles equally in height above the ground, so that way you can work the equalizer to get that final fastener plate onto that equalizer. So what I'm doing here is just simply raising or lowering the jack to get those wheel hubs aligned. The sequence that I put these fasteners on required a 3rd jack, so I got a hydraulic bottle jack out to help raise the equalizer, so that way I can get the wet bolt bracket installed in this final location. So lots of adjusting had to happen, getting the wheel hubs, axles, the leaf spring, and the equalizer all aligned. And again, apply grease to the wet bolts on this bracket lightly, and use your C-clamp to press on the outer plate and then hand tighten on the nuts prior to anything else. I completely forgot to install the blue colored Loctite onto the nuts prior to installing them. So I'm going back here and doing just that. Do not use the red or the orange, or you'll never get those nuts back off or get them torqued properly. The blue will help keep them from rattling off during a road trip. So that's all I'm doing, is going back and applying the Loctite where required. Alright, after you get all the nuts on there, you're going to want to use your torque wrench, set it to 45 pounds per foot, and then torque each and all of the fasteners. The 80 foot-pound torque mentioned earlier in this video was for the existing bolt and nut on the equalizer that came from the manufacturer. You just had to double check it was at 80 pound per foot. But everything that you just saw installed is 45 pounds per foot, and do not over torque or you may strip the bolts. I found a couple of them got stripped, and you'll see that shortly, from the threads just not fitting properly with the nuts that came with the system. So I ended up, you'll see later in this video how I went about removing those nuts, because they were secured onto those threads in a way that they wouldn't come back off. So stand by for that one. Once they're all torqued, you'll want to come back and get your grease gun and hit each of the zert fittings and properly grease the wet bolts. Do not over grease and do not under grease. Right now I'm finding that this nut is stripped. So as I said a few minutes ago, I will show you how I go about getting that removed and replaced. After you grease all the zert fittings at the wet bolts, you'll want to go ahead and pull the rubber plugs on your hubs and go ahead and grease your hub and drum. Now, after that, I'm getting ready to get the bolts off that were stripped, starting with this back one. So using my grinder, DeWalt grinder from Lowe's, and I'll get a link to that in the description. I'm going to grind this nut off here in 2 seconds. All right, so got that going. Just keep going and going until the sucker pops off. And make sure that you're not creating too much heat, because there is grease all around that location. And voila. Once that nut pops off, it'll shut down your tool. And then I used an older bolt, put it on the end, and a hammer to push the wet bolt back out the other side. After working on the end of the leaf spring, got that wet bolt taken care of. This top piece on the left and the top nut on the right of the equalizer both had stripped nuts as well. I had a severe issue with the product that was provided. So I'm getting ready to grind the one that I'm pointing at off. I had the other one threaded off and it came off much easier. But this one, the nut is stuck on poor threads, and Just going to have to get after it with the grinder like I did on the leaf spring. Again, you'll grind until it pops off, and what I did is use an older bolt shown here with a flat end, use it to knock out the wet bolt from the equalizer bracket. You'll have to adjust your axle using a crowbar or using the jack to get it loose, because there's tension on this bolt at all times. So you just keep working it until you can get that thing to pop out. This one is being quite the problem. Unfortunately, the MORryde package that I got only had 2 of these equalizer brackets. Well, 4 in total, 2 for each side. So what you didn't see is I had to take the 2 best wet bolts from the existing system removed, and that was a Dexter setup. I had to go to my press, push out the 2 bad wet bolts from MORryde, and then press in the Dexter fittings, and then now I'm just reinstalling the brackets. And unfortunately, the MORryde nut won't fit onto the Dexter bolts, so you have to make sure you keep the Dexter nuts around to fasten onto those, because the threads are completely different. Go figure. Now that I got those brackets back together, I'm going back and re-torquing each of the fasteners on the equalizer, and hopefully not strip out another nut, because I was running low on them. So I got those taken care of, and of course greased the wet bolts through the Zert fitting one more time. Clean it up, and then now that I've got all that solved, I'm going to get these tires back on, wheels and tires, get them placed, get the camper back on the ground so that I can go to the other side and repeat this process. Now the process on the other side went a little bit quicker because I had a different way of sequencing the repair. So you'll see that in a few minutes. But for right now, getting these wheels and tires back on. The spare in the tire is being put back on in this photo because I have not yet determined what company or what tire I'm going to put back onto the camper. So for now, just going to get everything fastened back up, get it retorqued, and the torques on the nuts for this particular RV and most RVs that I've owned is 125 125 foot-pounds for each. And make sure that you have a deep well socket with thin sides so you don't damage the wheel and or damage the lug nuts. All right, there we go. Day 1, side 1 complete on the day 2, side 2.
Your Your friendly Uniquely-DOUBLEBEE spokes puppy here. Again, I want to thank you for watching another Uniquely-DOUBLEBEE video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Now go on to more of our videos. Shoo, chillax, or skedaddle. Ruff, ruff.